talk to you today of a couple of things. Right, not really live right now, but what I'm doing is that I'm actually going to do uh, pretty much I'm going to do a sculpt as I talk about some things. And so what I'm going to do today, I'm going to show you some of the I'm going to show you some of the creatures I have. Right here, I have a bearded dragon, and I also have a poison arrow frog. And here is my Diplocalus, and here is a tiger that I made with masking tape. Everything here has been made out of masking tape, and all the creatures, as you can see, they have different things to them, which makes them really cool and unique. And it's all pretty much lightweight. But this is one of those finished jobs, and so finished jobs I wanted to just kind of show you. So what I'm gonna do today, I'm gonna sculpt some things, but I'm gonna put these here in the corners of them so you can always see them, and then so pretty much you have it where it's like you have the thing all set. So here I'm gonna go start masking tape. But as I do this, I'm gonna go ahead and just tell you some things about like some of the scenarios that I'm kind of just working through here. One of the things that we've been doing like a constitutional course, and so we've been like working through a constitutional course and works and stuff. So what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna shut off the music a little bit so that way you can hear me without having to compete with the music and stuff. So I'll put the music a little lower. All right, cool. So here we go. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sculpt. But I'm also going to tell you about some of the stuff that we've been learning. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go ahead and start sculpting. So pretty much, we've been doing a couple of courses on that of the Constitution, the United States Constitution. And one of the things that's really amazing about the Constitution is that it does a couple of things in which it helps our society out better. Our society, it's out of all the countries in the world, the American Constitution is one of those that limits the power of government, which is amazing because all of the constitutions. I'm not 100% sure on this, but many other constitutions and the way things are written are designed to stop people from their ability to do things. And so what happens is like I'm going to make a Diplocalus, so I'll use a Diplocalus template. So what I do is, for example, this is the same size as Diplocalus, so I'm going to show you right here. I said next time I do a live stream, I would definitely be sculpting, so I'm going to see if I can do that while I'm talking here. So pretty much what happens is like what I'm doing is that I'm going to be sculpting, but we talked about like how our American democracy, American Constitution, what it does is like we're not a democracy. We're not a place where the mob rules, because if the mob were to rule, eventually the mob would rule into itself or rule power or rule, be able to rule its taxes from the treasury. Like they say, if the people needed the power of democracy, they would eventually just vote for themselves to get more money back. And they can do that. Everybody could just vote for money. But the thing about what's different between a democracy and a constitutional republic is that the constitutional republic is that we are bound by the laws that we are set to limit the power of the government. The government was never supposed to be all powerful, full powerful, always enduring, never ending, unlimited. So, in two of the classes we talked about was the first one we talked about was the dangers of democracy in and of itself. That was one. The second class we talked about was the second class we were talking about talked about enumerated versus unlimited powers. And so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to walk you through some of the things that we picked up in our class, so you'll be able to hear that for yourself. So, for example, the first thing I talked about in lesson one, let me see, I put it in my lap so I can read it. Let's see, the first thing we learned about in lesson one was that the difference it wasn't what government did that made America great. It was what government was prevented from doing that made the difference. That was one of the things. Was what was prevented. The government was prevented from doing that. That's what made the difference. And so the thing was, the Constitution was there to stop the government from having more power than necessary. Here's number two. The founders did not create a government to do things for people, to take from some to give to another. They understood that when a government starts doing something for one citizen, it has to take from another to do so. And the process is gain control over both. So you have a thing where if you give one to the government, or you give one to one person, what ends up happening is that you have to take from somebody else to do it. You know? So because of that, it becomes like one of those things where, you're really robbing from Peter to pay Paul. And then, but in the end of it all, you gain control of both of them. So, like, for example, if you have, the more the government involves themselves in our life, the more stuff they take from the lives of the people. So what happens is, like in the case of, like, you have it where, the government is not supposed to, has a certain limited authority, and the authority is to protect life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for the citizens. See, and now what the government has done, the government has run rampant, is becoming more and more like an oligarchy, as opposed to being that of a constitutional republic. See, very simply put, what a constitutional republic is where you have a scenario where people are limited, to obey the law. Let's say, for example, there was a person who was a horse thief, like they have in the example in the paper we were watching, the movie we were watching. It said, for example, if the person is said to be a horse thief and he didn't do it, he said he didn't do it. What happens is, like, there's 20 people catch up with him and they catch him to bring him to justice. 20 people say he did it. One person says, and he's the one who says, I didn't. In a mob rule, that person who has, who's outnumbered by the mob will be like, okay, well, you know what, I fight for my own life, so I didn't do it. When in fact, they have no proof. They had to find the proof and to prove it. So in a mob rule, that person would be hung because 20 people versus the one person outnumbers him. But in a constitutional republic, what it is that you have every person's life is of value. Every person has a valuable life. They're worth something. So what ends up happening is that if you are a person that, they say a crime's been committed, you have to first prove that a crime has been committed. And, in the case of the horse thieves, you got to look and see that the horse thief stole horses, that they look into his possession and they find that it was there and that he put it there. It wasn't like some kind of sabotage dealing where somebody says they did it, but in fact it was somebody else who did it. Or the other thing is that it has to be where, one is the proof, you have to have the proof, and then you have to be able to tie that he was a person or she was a person who did the crime that's worthy of punishment. In the case of a murder, you have to prove that person killed the other person, and it has to be without a reasonable doubt, or that person walks free. In the case of a criminal court case, as opposed to that of in the event of that of it's pretty much a civil or that belonging to a possession type court case. So in the case of, like, a murder trial, it has to be proven without a shadow of doubt that this person is guilty without a cause, or guilty without any, with all the proof points to them being guilty. So they have that one there. So back to the first one, it says, the second one says, the founders did not create a government to do things for the people, to take from some to give to others. They understood that when a government starts doing something for one citizen, it was to take from another to do so. And in the process, it gains control over both. Now, we know, after being through this whole thing this year, that the government has no power to do what it did in a lot of things. Unfortunately, they did a lot of bad things to us. One of the things they were doing was taking away our rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It always runs that way, by the way. We find out that just recently that, that a judge, according to the Constitution, like a Supreme Court judge, doesn't have a lifetime seat. What they have is based upon their behavior. If their behavior changes, according to the Constitution, if their behavior changes or the things that they do, they can be removed from office, because of bad behavior. For example, bad behavior is, for example, someone wants to say, like, hey, they swear to take an oath to take the Constitution, right? They swear to take an oath to uphold the laws of the land and the Constitution. And what they do is that they say that they're not interested in serving the Constitution anymore. That's a breach of office. That's a breach of oath. And they say they look more towards other countries' constitution than just America's constitution. If you look in history, someone actually said that, and they were not removed from office because somebody said, or they looked to it and thought that the Supreme Court judges could not be held accountable, or they're there for life, which is not true. They're not there for life. The next thing, too, the Constitution was written to govern the government, not the people, nor the states. See, the states and the people are not given over to that of the government. You see, the thing is, the Constitution was written so that it would keep a rule from happening where there would be an oligarchy, because they say there's no such thing as a true monarchy. The monarchy is not written or run by the true situation. What ends up happening is that you have a myriad of people. Oh, sorry. You have a myriad of people who are. Oh, my lights went up. Okay, so you have a myriad of people who are trained, who are behind the dictatorship. And what ends up happening is they actually run behind a dictatorship and they help him rule. as opposed to like there's the anarchy, which is the other side of the spectrum, is that where there's no law, no government, no law, and what ends up happening there, there are always a a mob of sorts, or warlords of sorts that run everything, and they have their government, and so what happens is only for a time until a dictatorship takes over and starts ruling people by might, So you have it's a matter of time. It's a matter of time before anyone ever even like starts doing things in terms of like a dictatorship, to where they start doing stuff. What's the word? They start doing stuff to the point where they're not really a true anything but an oligarchy. An oligarchy is where you have a few ruling, and they have this person and this house versus that house ruling, and so instead of it being like a place where people get a chance to have representation or a chance to voice their opinions and voice their upsets, to elected officials, what ends up happening is that you just have a few people who impose, like Canada, they impose their point of view, like they have a minority clause in their stuff, so they kind of cater to the poor, but it's like because the ruling class says it's okay, as opposed to it being where everybody's of value, So that's one of those things. So the Constitution was written to govern the government, not the people and not the states. Number four, the founders created a central government with strictly limited powers. This left the states free to compete with one another to be the best state, the one with the least amount of taxation and controls, one where citizens would want to build a business and raise a family. That was the point what they wanted to do. James Madison, John Adams, and Alexander Hamilton wrote essays explaining the Constitution to encourage the people to support adopting this new form of government. These essays were collected into a volume known as the Federal Papers. Let's see. Matching, let's see. So we have like when you have a monarchy is ruled by one, which is never really true because it usually has a cabinet of people that help rule it. The next one is an oligarchy. Oligarchy is ruled by a few. A democracy, that's where the ruled by a majority. And that's I always wonder sometimes about that, whether or not there's actually a statement as to whether or not people actually do rule by majority versus being ruled by the like for example, when we pick a president or we do a voting type thing, there is an aspect where there is a majority rule in terms of like the votes, and so I've been like looking into that myself, trying to figure that out, like how that works, because I mean, at some point it has to be like a little bit of where people vote, and more people can cast a vote and come to a conclusion more than if a person didn't vote or something like that. So my thought is like here you have it where there's a chance where a person can actually vote and vote out, and so it is kind of like a little bit of a mob rule, but it was like the people were represented. And so that's where it's kind of like the thing about voting. Voting should be done by only people who are, informed about what's going on. You shouldn't be allowed to vote if you have no idea what's going on. Otherwise, you're gonna be a mob that picks a bad person because you like the color of his shoes or something, And that's not cool. That's not cool in all, because when you look at that, that's just kind of you. How many people don't know what the values are of the people they're voting for, and they just go ahead and vote for them? That's just ridiculous because you're voting for a stranger, and then you ask a stranger to rule over you, or to represent you, and you don't even know who they are. So that's kind of like a dumb thing. Bottom line is like they should have where the people know what's about before you go. You should take a class and something. You make sure you took a class before you go to hit the check boxes. Otherwise you're gonna end up voting for some stranger that you're gonna be like, well, I didn't vote for that person. And that's the other thing too. It's like what the media did during the last couple of elections and what they've done the last couple of years have been, especially here in New York, they've been there to just kind of bombard people with what they decide they want to hear. So when you control the narrative and you control what people hear, it's like teaching children. Kids only know what you tell them, unless of course people go out and do that, but then the people will believe. So you have a majority of people believing something that's not true or something that is true, and and they won't know how to quantify or even rectify or make sense of stuff. So anyway, what happens is like you have this scenario where it's like you have this scenario where people are just doing whatever, they're doing whatever, and they're not like paying attention to the significance of life, and so because they don't understand what's going on. So it's like people are just so busy working and doing the jobs and trying to make ends meet, they have no time to do that. But that's why people take advantage. The people in the politics take advantage because they know that people don't have time. So they say, "Oh, just pick me because I'm the best one." But they really have no frame of reference often. So that's kind of where it gets kind of crazy. The the rights of the gunmen aren't subject to majority rule, but to the law. This is the essence of the republic, right? This is the essence of the republic. The rights of the government aren't subject to majority rule, but to law. This is the essence of the republic. Number 8, the essence of freedom is the proper limitation of government. See, the government is neither, it's not your friend, it is force. Government is force, you know? It is a cruel master. It's a cruel master. It's a cruel master and a wicked servant. You know, it's force. It's not eloquence. It's not niceness. It's not kindness. It is force. Government is force. And so when you invoke government rule onto something, you fight government into something. You really ask the government to come and beat you or beat whoever is. And eventually they'll turn and come after you too. Remember, if the government gives you something, then you had to take it from somebody else because government doesn't make its own money. You know, government takes money from the people. So whenever you get a dollar from the government, somebody had to lose a dollar in order for you to get that dollar. You know, that's how it works out in terms of the government. Next one is knowing that we as Americans are ultimately left with only two choices. We can keep our republic, as Franklin put it, or we'll inevitably end up with an oligarchy, a tyranny of the elite. You'll have we see what happened in the system right now. You have all these elites, these rich billionaires are going out doing stuff. You know, these people are crazy rich. They can go out there and change this world, and they can afford to. They can buy up whole properties. You have like certain people buying up all the farmland. You got people putting things into space. You have them doing all kind of stuff. But, if you believe in space, but for the most part, though, you have it where they're doing stuff. They're doing stuff. I guess low Earth orbit because that's technically not space anyway. So you have it where it's like people are just doing stuff. And the bottom line is, the more you look into it, you start seeing that there are people who rule the world, and they don't operate under the government, but they are subjected to the, just life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They can't infringe upon another person's right, but when they start invoking the government to help them, because you see, people go and they lobby the government to make laws, and when they make a law on somebody, it's to take away a right. So when you have a thing where you take away a right, you run into a situation where people are just constantly being not bombarded, but they are being affected by the whims of another person. Let's raise this up a little bit higher. That way it's not to focus so much. It's weird, like the autofocus. It's just like it keeps autofocusing. Okay, so I wanted to stay put. Anyway, so you have this thing here where it's like that's one. The next thing is the essence of freedom is the proper limitation of government. Switch my light for a second. Alright. Let's see switch my light to the power source. So okay, you have that. Next is the essence of freedom is the proper limitation of government. So capital is the means of production. So the ability for a person to make something that they can turn into a means to provide food or income for their family is a means of capital. Right? So capital. In order for ownership of property to be fulfilled and complete, all four aspects must be met. Let's see, title, title control, use, ability to dispose. I see. State control capitalism results in high price and low quality. When something's done by the state, you always talk about when you go to DMV, it's like pretty much you're there and you're just like, oh dag, they don't want to be there, and you definitely don't want to be there. What ends up happening is that you're kind of put up against, dealing with the whims of the moodiness of the DMV at the point. So it's like when you do government something, it's not really good quality. Like, you remember there was a website a long time ago where they had to build a website for the Obamacare back in the day, and I remember that when they launched it and it crashed because for some strange reason there's something about government that when a government does something, it's not meant for high quality. It's meant for I guess not the word high quality. It's more like it's meant to do this so that people can get more money later. It's like they say something about government. When a government policy has this thing where if they give you money or they get money from the taxpayers, they say, for example, to get $10 million. If their work that they do costs less than $10 million to accomplish, right? So, for example, instead of being $10 million, it's only $9 million for them to accomplish it, right? What ends up happening is that if they do it for $9 million when they were given $10 million, what will happen? Next year's budget will be $9 million. So what they do, they tend to go and try and spend more than they can on things, but they don't do the good quality work. I mean, sometimes you have these things. You always talk about these things where, these bridges have to be repaired, these roads. I mean, all the money that we spend on roads, for real, the money that people pay in taxes on gas tax for roads, and some people don't even drive, have to pay gas tax, right? And what ends up happening, they have to pay for all these things. We pay for the tolls, all the roads and stuff that we pay for. It should be like paved in gold. That thing should be paved. We should have like actually golden roads, like heaven. Because of all the money people pay. And the road should never break down. It should never be a hole in the road, a pothole, or any of that. It should be like made with indestructible materials that'll be able to like last forever. I mean, you got these Roman roads that were made that are still good to this day, and then you have like our roads that are like 6 months they're already garbage again. So it's like you have like the 2,000-year-old roads that are like perfect, but in here you have like roads that they make here in America, and it's just like garbage. So for the most part, though, it's like I mean, no, nothing against the workers. Workers are doing what they're told by their bosses, and the bosses are being told by their union leaders, and the union leaders are being told by their bosses, and all that stuff, all the way up to where all the work is getting paid to get done. They say when people do stuff to privatize stuff, sometimes it gets done way better. So there is a reason why there's a UPS and there's a FedEx, because when you have the post office just doing whatever, you know, I mean, no insult to the post office for those who do their job well, but those who don't do their job well, they get paid regardless. So when you have it like that, you have a situation where it's like you're faced with so many different choices, because if you do privatize it, they pride the fact in that they get paid for doing a job well done. So you ship it by UPS, or you ship it by FedEx, or you ship it by DHL, or ship it by any of these companies they'll get your stuff guaranteed overnight shipping, because the post office tends to be the federal you know system. One time we had a situation happen. Oh, I can't even get into too much detail about it, but it was like they were just like, oh goodness. Okay, I'll just stop that. Stop there. You have it where next thing too you have is the go back to what it said. State controlled capitalism results in high price and low quality. Benjamin Franklin cautioned. He said, "Only virtuous people are capable of freedom. As nations become corrupt and vicious, they have more need of masters. When people no longer can govern themselves or fear the Lord, what happens? They end up having cruel masters." All throughout the Bible, you have scenarios like that, where people were like, not doing what they're supposed to do. And instead of seeking the Lord, what they ended up doing was they sought the Baal, they sought the false god, they sought their own lusts and desires, and eventually put them into a situation where they were no longer, able to be free, or they got put into bondage, bondage to other nations. Because what ended up happening was that they find themselves just kind of really totally just being what's the word? They find themselves being at the mercy of people who didn't care for their values, and their values were themselves. So God sent them over, gave them over to their desires. It's like sometimes the worst thing you can have is what you want. It's like sometimes there's people who go after stuff that's not really good for them to go after, and then incidentally, what ends up happening is they end up putting themselves in some really, really, really bad problems, because the bottom line is like when you look at, sometimes getting what you want might be a blessing if you don't get it. Because sometimes it's like, the thing that you get is not good for you. It's like kids getting all the candy they want. It's like, let's have as much candy as we possibly can have. So instead of what happened, they just kind of pay attention, just having like none, they end up having like, all this candy, and they'll eat until it hurts their stomach. But candy is a bad example. Like, for example, watching TV or playing video games until your eyes bulge out of your head. I've always found that video games is kind of an interesting thing, because it's like you play a game and you really don't accomplish anything. Maybe in your mind you accomplish something. Maybe you beat yourself in terms of like your ability. You said, I just challenged myself to a duel and I won, kind of thing. Or you learned some kind of, I guess, you were able to finish something. But in the end of the day, when you do like a video game or anything on a computer, really, it's like it's kind of in a different dimension. You're kind of working in another world. It's like the whole metaverse thing. You have it where these people are like making stuff, and they're making things in another world, and you don't touch it. You can't touch it, feel it, but you can surely pay for it. It can make you pay money for it. Like there was like a game, people playing these games, and in the games you're playing, they have what's it like Fortnite or something. You have assets you can buy, or even like almost like a Ready Player One type thing. You can buy stuff. So you're buying like digital assets that you can't bring into the real world. Maybe you can 3D print it somehow. But that's what happened to me. I was like saying to myself, I did a lot of like animation. I did a lot of Blender and 3D graphics and animation. And then I was like, you know what? Well, 3D graphics, but just animation, because 3D graphics is different. and motion graphics are different than but 3D graphics, 3D effects and animation stuff was really cool because incidentally I learned how to just kind of make stuff, and then I got a 3D printer. I was able to print some things, but then when I started printing stuff, I was like, okay, you know what? There's so many things that can go wrong with a 3D printer. This is why before I got into the whole thing with masking tape, I started myself, this is cool with the 3D printer, but it takes 8 hours to do something that's maybe maybe if I had one of those resin printers, but that's a whole different ball of wax too, because I didn't like the whole thing about the poisons. I know people get past that; they can get past that easily to just rinse off the poisons. But I'm like, rinse off the poison into what? It's the whole thing about there's a thing about if you have a thing that's waterproof, how do you wash your hands? You got to wash your hand with some kind of chemical, and then you got to drain that down the sink. And I just wonder how much poison we put into the waterways. Anyway, that's some crazy stuff if you think about it. So for the most part, though, what ends up happening is back to your saying before, you have to kind of go out and do stuff, because trying to accomplish things, without what's the word, accomplish things without any, without to play a video game, it's not a real thing. It's not a real world. And so people have turned and given themselves over to many lusts and many desires, and many desires and many lusts they have don't lead you to the proper perspective or lead you to the proper place you need to be. What ends up happening is that people just tend to give in to temptation, and then later they're sorry they did. I have many friends who've given into certain kind of temptations, and then later they're regretting it. And so I just, you have to pray for the people, some things, because temptation is not always like a thing where it's like, it's a wicked thing. Sometimes temptation, the worst thing about temptation, it's like it's something that keeps you from focusing on God. It may not even be a bad thing. For example, if your temptation is like a book or something, you like reading books, that takes you away from, focusing on who God is or knowing about Him. That's one of the things that's kind of crazy because, when you start looking at how life works, it's like, even in the Bible talks about how in the days of Sodom and Gomorrah, in the days of Noah, when the flood came for them to take them away, it wasn't they were doing abomination. No, they were sitting there eating and drinking and marriage and giving in marriage. They were doing the normal things that everybody does. But the thing is, like, immoral people, it talks about like a virtuous people who fear God, they are capable of freedom because you start saying, you know what, let me think and what's best for my fellow man. A couple days, my wife and I, we were like kind of coming home from the night market, and we saw a couple of things that were like kind of crazy. We saw like when people just drop garbage in the street. We saw when people did this thing where they would take something that didn't belong to them, or no, pretty much like it was one person had a cart and they didn't put the cart back where somebody else can use it. They put the cart way way out where nobody else can use it. And it was like it wasn't us because we were like kind of at that point we were driving home and we saw this person like bring in a cart and we're like, why doesn't that person care about his fellow man enough to go and bring that cart back to where somebody else can use it? Instead just leaves it where just thinking about themselves. It's like we're selfish people. Us humans are selfish people. And then so you have that where it's like it's a sad thing because when you start thinking about like how we can make our lives better for each other, and instead of making it better, we just make it better for ourselves. And so I sit there and I think to myself, it's just one of those things where, I mean, how does a person, just do something bad and let people go? Like they always talk about people who are being hurt or attacked, and other people, just do stuff that's like, really just allow it. And so I was sitting there thinking about like, I mean, like maybe I should have gone out and done something. I should have gone and pushed the cart back or something. That would have been helpful. Or maybe something like, go and, with the garbage in the street, go and do something. But see, it takes somebody else to do something. And that person could have done something to change the world. Like this is the garbage truck at one point. They had to recycle, and instead of them just like, clean up the mess that they just made, they left the mess in the middle of the street for somebody to run over, and they just like, all pridefully driving away. It's just one of those things where it's like, they say where do wars come from? It says because we think we are right. It's like WAR, we are right. That's where wars come from because people think they're right, and they go out of their way to just, not care about their fellow men like that. That's why it's the golden rule is really important. Do unto others as you have them do unto you. Don't do wickedness to people. Don't do bad things to people, man. Because you will get it back. If you're a mean person, you're gonna get meanness back at you. If you're a kind person, you're gonna get kindness back at you. It's just the way the world works. Sometimes kind people get hurt and get victimized by wicked people, but there's the God in heaven who looks for these things. So He watches out. He makes sure things are going, properly. Sometimes it doesn't receive because judgment isn't quick and swift. People like lose heart and get all scared. So but then sometimes when judgment is so quick, you're just like, oh my goodness, I didn't see that coming. That was amazing. They see how quickly judgment changes hands and how people's lives are now different because of it. You know. So you have this thing where, so back to this thing here. Scottish historian Alexander Tyler warned, a democracy cannot exist as a permanent form of government. It can only exist until the voters discover that they can vote themselves money from the public treasury. From that moment on, the majority always votes for the candidate promising the most benefits from the public treasury, with the results with the result that a democracy always collapses over loose fiscal policy, always followed by a dictatorship. So what happens after we or this country falls? I hope it doesn't fall. I hope it fixes itself before that many people when we go to vote next year or this year, that you don't vote for the topic of the day, but we vote for the future. It says like, this is what the future needs to be. These leftists, they like to people on the left, they like to vote for things that are like I always say that there's a thing they don't see the outcome, the long term effect of their endeavor. Like if they choose to go and do something, you don't play the consequence game right. It says what, there's a consequence for every action, good and bad. If you do something bad, there's a consequence. If you do something good, there is a consequence, and the scenario of life itself. It says right here on question 15. It says the question would like no point 15. It says Chinese dictator Mao Zedong candidly admitted the democratic revolution is a necessary preparation for the socialist revolution, and the socialist revolution is the inevitable sequel to the democratic revolution. So after the democratic revolution, there comes the socialist revolution, and the socialist revolution ends in a dictatorship. So when you have like these people have the what do you call it, the mob rule, eventually the mob rule leads into chaos because people start like voting for money, and you got these rich people who know how to find the loopholes, and they know how to get lobbies to do what they want and do their bidding. And eventually what happens is that you end up with the people who do not seek out the best interests of all of those around them, but only for themselves. And eventually the country devolves into a dictatorship. That's like class 1, the first class that we had. And class 2 talks about the enumerated powers. So the first one talked about like democracy versus pretty much how the dangers of democracy. The second talks about the enumerated powers, right? And enumerated powers, what it means is that it's powers on a list. So for example, you go to the grocery store, and the grocery store says, usually I want to go ahead and buy just mustard greens, and I want to buy some milk and some eggs, and that's your enumerated list. So if you happen to see something and you go impulse purchase, and you say, well, I'm going to buy this toy set, or I'm going to go buy this flower pot or plant or candy bar, that really wasn't on the list. That was actually not enumerated on the list. That's outside of the scope of what you're trying to accomplish. So what happens is that you have this thing we were studying. We talked about several different things that are enumerated, which means that are listed, and listed and limited. So example, you go to a garage or a mechanic to fix your car for you, and what ends up happening is that the mechanic, instead of fixing your car, or for example, you go for brake pads to be fixed, which happens, and then what happens is like the brake pads needs to be fixed, and you end up going to they instead of fixing your brake pads, they actually change the color of your car. They change your car from they add windows to it. They charge you for everything they do, of course. But as they do it, they charge you more and more and more. And eventually, it's like you come back to your car and you say, well, listen, we took a liberty to fix your car and to repair the windows and to fix that check engine light and give you a new transmission. It's great if it's free, but if they start charging you things that was not enumerated, what they've done in the government is that they've taken things that were limited and turned them into a source of like they've done things that are not listed for them to do. So as we were going through our second class, we talked about like how there's an aspect of like an aspect of government's been given certain things, certain rights and responsibilities to do, but when they start going outside of it, they start doing things to like kind of trick it up or mess it up or or to do things in their favor for their own survival. And so one of the things they did, there's some different clauses. See now different clauses. Instead of them saying this, there's some limitations on the Congress, because they say for one, all the laws of the land that can be made can only be made by Congress. You cannot have a law like they have like for example, Roe versus Wade, that was made by the Supreme Court. That's not a law that they can actually have as a law, because only one that can make a law, judicial, legislative advancement for the country is Congress. Congress can only make a law. All law should be made by Congress. So there's been people who are doing, for example, executive rule like the presidents. They're not allowed. They're not supposed to be able to do that. That's not actually a enumerated law or enumerated right in the Constitution for the executive branch, because the executive branch is not supposed to be able to rule from the bench. As a matter of fact, if all powers belong to the Congress, then there's no other power for lawmaking belongs to any other branches. So whenever there's an executive branch or law or whatever, that's something that's a violation. Or when the justice is supposed to interpret a law and not supposed to make law. There's a thing called case law, and case law is it's against the Constitution. So when you have certain laws that are given, people take it, and instead of them doing what's right, they do what's given to them, or what they do what they deem as best, and that deem as best is not exactly what they should be doing. So you have that here. The next one is so this Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof. See, pursuance means what follows or follow after. Pursuance means like pursuit. Okay, this Constitution and the laws of the United States. This is an Article 6, Clause 2. This is called the Supremacy Clause. This Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, shall be the supreme law of the land. Right? There's the General Welfare Clause, Article 1, Section 8. It says, Clause 1, if Congress can do whatever in their discretion can be done by money, and let's see, if Congress can do whatever is in their discretion can be done by money and will promote the general welfare, the government is no longer a limited one. See, because you have this thing, enumerated versus unlimited. Enumerated means limited. Unlimited means, so if they have unlimited power, they can do anything. Government can do anything, say anything, be anywhere. They can say all that stuff, and they can do stuff, and they vote themselves to have more power. We give ourselves raises and government shutdowns and all that stuff. For the most part, though, when you have it where if they can deal whatever they want based on what they want, they have money. If Congress can do whatever in their discretion can be done by money and will promote the general welfare, the government is no longer a limited one. Congress has not unlimited powers to provide for the general welfare, but only those specifically enumerated. That's by Thomas Jefferson. Congress does not have unlimited power to provide for the general welfare, but only those specifically enumerated. The two categories of enumerated powers found in Article 1, Section 8 are common defense and general welfare. The elastic clause, aka the necessary and proper clause, Section 1, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18, it says, the Congress shall have power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers. When you have the word foregoing, the foregoing means it's like, that was already set forth. What ends up happening is because the Congress and the government tend to become like, what you're looking at, become bad servants. They're not doing what the masters of them have given them power to do, but just enumerated. So if you send someone out, you send your kid out to the grocery store, right? You tell them, I want you to buy some kale for the lizard, right? And they buy the kale for the lizard. That's great. They did exactly what was expected of them to do. If you send your kids out, or you send a servant out to go get something for you, you said, listen, I need you to go and get some kale for my lizard. And you don't come back with kale, they come back with everything else. What ends up happening is that they are not doing what they was enumerated. Like, for example, people give you money, and when they give you cash money, they tell you, I want you to do this and this and this with it. I want you to put this in your savings account, and I want you to, or give it to your kids, or I want you to put this in towards the bank, or go buy a nice meal with this money, right? If you are given money and you don't do what you're told to do with it, you're not doing what the intention of the money was. So it's kind of like you're robbing it of its intention, and the energy that was given to create it is not going to the proper place. It's kind of like a thing where they say like money attracts money, but also if you don't do what's right, it's like you're kind of messing with the purpose of the money and where it's supposed to go. So you have that. There's the next thing too is next one, the elastic clause. Power. The Congress shall have the power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers. The next one, and so, as we're talking about how they become bad servants, there's a commerce clause. Let's see, the Commerce Clause is the power to regulate commerce must carry the same meaning throughout the sentence and remain a unit, unless there be some plain, intelligible cause which alters it. So, for example, if it's a right for people to have arms, bear arms, right, and they have the foregoing powers in the Commerce Clause, you have a thing where it has to be able to be the same. If they say America does not allows for citizens to be armed, then it's okay for for us to help others to be armed too. But if it says not okay for others to be armed, then they go and they arm other countries. That's not right. That's not fair, and that's not keeping to the general welfare or to the Commerce Clause. Let's see. See, so for example, they talk about this. They said there should be no foreign aid. We should not be handing out foreign aid to any other country. That's actually a violation of the Constitution. Because what happens is like there's all powers. Okay, I'll explain what it says. No such power over foreign powers, state or otherwise, or state or Indians. They have. See, the thing is that you're not supposed to. The Chief Justice John Marshall said that pretty much that the power to regulate commerce must carry the same meaning throughout the sentence and remain a unit, unless there be some plain intelligible cause which alters it. So no such powers over foreign powers. It has to be the same. The next one is treaty law, Article 6, Clause 2. It would be manifestly contrary to the objectives of those who created the Constitution, as well as those who are responsible for the Bill of Rights, let alone alien to our entire constitutional history and tradition to construe Article 6 as prevent the United States to exercise power under an international agreement without observing constitutional prohibitions. I'll read that again. It would be manifestly contrary to the objectives of those who created the Constitution, as well as those who are responsible for the Bill of Rights, let alone alien to our entire constitutional history and tradition to construe Article 6 as permitting the United States to exercise power under the international agreement without observing constitutional prohibitions. See, like for example, when they had the thing with the United Nations and how the United Nations, or even though the WHO was saying stuff, how we should do stuff, they have no right to do that. Okay, there's no right for the WHO to take power or to be able to tell the U.S. citizens anything. We as Americans are autonomous and we're independent from the world stage. We do not have to be part of the world's madness and their foolishness. What has happened is that they have taken the ability, they've taken the opportunity to try and put us into a globalized system and deny our Constitution of its power. By them doing that, they are in violation of their state, of their oath of office. Their oath of office is to uphold the Constitution. So any House of Representative person, any person in the government, whether it be president or judiciary branch, that goes in violation of their oath of office should be impeached and removed. Why? Because they had violated their oath. They promised they would uphold the Constitution. They promised that they would do this. So amendments versus usurpation. If, in the opinion of the people, distribution or modification of the constitutional powers be it any particularly wrong, let let it be corrected by an amendment in which the Constitution designates, but let there be no change to by usurpation, usurping. For though this in one instance may be the instrument of good, in the customary weapon by which free governments are destroyed. George Washington Federal Address. If you want to change something, do it right. Okay. Like for example, when the thing with DeSantis, what he did was that he did it right. He actually got the law to kind of look into the situation. The government had given Disney power over a certain area, and the government can take it back. Now people are saying that this is a retaliation strike against him, and I don't agree because he didn't stop them from saying what they're saying. They're allowed to say whatever they want to say. But they're not just saying they want to say. They're actually plotting to do something against families and against the people. So if in the rights of the people, this is also protect against foreign and domestic threats, right? One of the domestic threats that if the people will vote against them interfering with their children and their lobbying, and this company happens to be a children company, and they're going to go ahead and just kind of put things that parents don't want into their agenda, not because they're going to try and change the laws. The law says you can't do that. The law says you can't do these things. You can't teach children these things at a certain age. It's like an R rating. It says a parental guidance. It's R rated R. No children for under 17 is admitted. And you have different higher ratings than that. Worse ones. You have no children allowed, right? NC-17 and things like that. No children under 17. You have X-rated. All kind of things, right? Kids can't go to any of this stuff. But now they want to go ahead and teach little kids about sex and things like that. Little kids about sex, and it's not even their time to learn about that. They don't know nothing about nothing yet. So, but incidentally, what they've done is that they've taken the opportunity to do something that shouldn't be done, and make it into something, for their political well-being. And they don't care. Like, talking about the elites. Elites don't care about the common person in terms of, like, they don't care about their needs and desires. They'll just use those needs to end. It's like the globalist agenda. They use this pandemic to, turn people against each other, and then to usher in, jabs and stabs, and lock the world down. Look what happens in China. China is being locked down, and they're not even trying to solve a problem. They don't know how to solve a problem, because it's like, they it's like it kind of came back to them. They quote unquote made something, and then now it's come back to them. But unfortunately, it's the people who suffer. The people always suffer at the hands of the leaders. And see what happens when you have a democracy? It turns into an oligarchy. It turns into a tyranny, a dictatorship. You eventually have people locked into their homes, and they can't get out for the greater good of society. See, that was never supposed to happen. We're never supposed to have been locked down. 15 days is slow to spread is why I cannot vote for Mr. If he decides to run again, I'm not going to vote for him, because it's like, and I don't want to vote for any of these people who are going to just continue the agenda of trying to be part of the globalist agenda. There's Event 2030 coming up. That's like in, 8 years from now? That's Event 30. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. That's something they want you to do. But for the most part, though, we have been, we are not part of their agenda. We are not. I don't even know why the United Nations is even in America, in the United States, in here in New York. It doesn't belong here. The United Nations should be somewhere in the middle island somewhere, and just people go to it. It should not be here in New York. I don't know why it's here. I don't know why we allowed globalists to try and take over our constitution and not obey it, because they can do that themselves. They can do their own things. They don't care about the common man. They want to depopulate the world. So you have this scenario where it's like, when you have people come into the world, you want them to go ahead and make a difference. But here you have it where this thing called our freedom, the way it runs is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You can't have liberty if you don't have life. You can't have the pursuit of happiness if you don't have liberty. And you can't, so you need to have life. It goes in that order because that's the order of importance. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So here we have it. I made, while I was talking, I was able to make a Diplocalus. You watched me do it from start to finish. So this is a Diplocalus. Looks like Big Brother Diplocalus, And so what happens is, like, Big Brother, Big Sister, and here's the different creatures that I've made. I'm so glad I was able to share with you some of the things. Just a couple things. Let's talk about quick things on I'll add some more details to it, and let's talk about some more things here. Let's see. You have a thing about Elon Musk and him buying Twitter. I don't care. I think it's pretty cool. I hope it works out. I hope he's able to bring back free speech to that platform. People get a chance to share. The thing about DeSantis and in Florida, I think he did a good thing. I am not going to. I think he was able to give the will of the people back to the people. They voted for that. The people voted. The rules were there. Don't talk to my kid about stuff that I don't approve of, or don't talk to my kids about things I don't want them to hear about. So that's there. So if you talk to my kids, you have to ask my permission. And so that's something there. But for the most part, though, don't you go being a teacher trying to teach my kids stuff. And people should be homeschooling kids anyway. I don't know why people put the kids in public school. I mean, what is we talked about last time about Molech, and how Molech was a Babylonian. I think it was one of the Phoenician gods, and they were wicked, man. He was a wicked one, because you had to immolate their children. They would sacrifice their children on the altar, the arms of Molech, and he would just destroy them. And so he'd destroy them, immolate their kids, and that was just a terrible, terrible, terrible thing. So all right, so here we have this. This is one, and then so let's see what happens in the rest of the world, what's going on. But that's all I have for now. I just wanted to just kind of talk a little bit about what's going on, and as the process is going to make something, to show you how I make something in on masking tape. I can make more stuff, but I'm just going to show you some of the creatures too. Here's like a tiger. I made this tiger out of masking tape, and pretty much he looks like a tiger. He has the tiger-esque vibes and stuff. And so, pretty much, I'll show you my cool gremlin, because I like making gremlins. So here's a cool gremlin for you. Yeah, so this one I haven't given a name to yet, but if you want to, tell me what name should be a good name for him. But anyway, for the most part, this is like a nice new gremlin that I got, that I made. And so I'm going to add more details to him, because he seemed like he's lacking some details and stuff too. But for the most part, here's a nice gremlin made of masking tape. All right, and that's all I have for today. I just want to say thank you so much for listening and for watching my program. And the music in the background was from Bug Riders, GT Interactive, and I like the Bug Rider soundtrack from PlayStation. I guess PlayStation One, PS1. Anyway, so is PS1 or PS2? I think it's PS1. Yeah. And so I remember getting this game. It was really cool. You get to ride on the back of bugs. So anyway, so let's say God bless you. Thank you so much for watching my program, and I wish you all the best. And I'm gonna say bye now. So bye. Take care. Bye.